character customization to the system, and I'm doing it as a event type. To give an example of how you can add your own customized event idea or something that you want to the system. And with the character creation being an event, you can pretty much put it anywhere that you want. Even if you wanted to have something where they could go to, somewhere like your home base and actually go into character creation, kind of like a Fallout or something like that, where you can just go and make more changes to your characters and stuff like that as the game progresses, or maybe they get new, I don't know, outfits or something, and you want to be able to save that to the database and change their hair color and other crap. So let's look at this here, what I have. So right now I have the actual event triggered as a level starting event. So as soon as the level starts, it's going to open the custom character creation menu and bring it in. Mind you, not something that you want to do exactly as soon as you blend into a level, but I have it here. So here I have my character Mika. Pretty much I have the different sections that are set up inside of an updated version of my hold on, I'm saying this wrong. First things first, I have 4 different sections. Each of these sections are defined inside of the actual blueprint for the HUD item, and these items are gathered in lists that can be saved to the database for whatever character customization that you have for your character. So I've changed the skin material, the material to be able to use a sliding skin tone for the skin color, going from just 2 different ranges of colors, which as far as what I need for purpose, that's a good range of colors that I can use for customization. You can change the character's height. You can change the muscle tone, and this one's actually a morph. So this one I'm actually scaling the character's height. This one I'm changing an actual material parameter for the character skin, where most of the effect for changing the colors is just in the scalar parameter for the material. Here I have the eyes. So we can change the eye color. We can change the lip color if need be. For these morphs, I actually got these. All of my morphs pretty much come from excuse me. All these morphs pretty much come from DAS Studios for the Genesis model. I just picked a few that I wanted to use to be able to add a little bit of customization to the character, to be able to, give some kind of customization, but still keep the character that I want it to look like to still look like that, but still let the player add some morphs and changes to the actual model. Again, you got eye size, eye height, eyes closed. Changes for the ears, nose, mouth, yada yada yada. All of these are morphs. I think I have some extra stuff that's in my morph category that should not be here. And for the face, I have it to where you can put a little bit of emotion in the character, however you want the person to defaultly look. Your resting base face kind of thing. Hair color. Now for the hair color, I've changed the material. to have a specific material for a base color, a highlight level 1, and a highlight level 2. So this way you can go in and actually change. You can use a very specific name for the actual material, and it'll just go through and scan for that name to apply the color to it. And the randomize button will let me pretty much just go through. If I can zoom out, it'll let you go through and just randomize from all the preset morphs and height, skin colors, other random colors for whatever you have in your tree to be able to get a character however you want. Let's see, reset back to default. And pretty much, so I can pretty much change this, save changes, start playing in the level. And exit out. And I'm actually going to load for my quick save instead of starting the whole level over again. And then we come back from our quick save, we should have the same settings. We should have the same settings, but maybe I messed something up in the last few changes that I did. Let me try this again. Save settings. This thing is proving me to be a liar, but this works. I made some changes at the last minute that might have broken this because I'm trying to balance loading the information from the quick save file and the master database. And I think that I'm always loading from the master database right now instead of my save file. And inside the master database, I've actually stored this character colorization for this character. So I can actually change that real quick to prove that I'm not crazy. So let's see, in the customization panel, I have a value right here that says duplicate default values to source. And this is actually what I use to make my initial character. So pretty much when you start a new game, it's going to come in and, let's see, load configurations. I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I can at least show this part. So when we load our character default, it's going to, unless we override and say always use source, which I think that's what I do when I hit the default button, I'm always loading from the source database. But any other time that we call it, we want to use our active database. So what we're going to do normally is come in here and we're going to load the configurations from the source, from the current active database. So the current one you're actually working on or playing through the current gameplay. If there's nothing here and if it can't find any kind of customizations, then it's going to default back to whatever's default in the database for your character configuration. So if you've never set up anything, you've never saved it, it's going to use the source database. And pretty much since I started a new game, that's what it's using. And when I'm starting up this level for the first time, there's nothing stored in that database yet for the customer characterization, so it's still defaulting back to the source. So what I can do here is go in here and enable duplicate the source, so that way it's going to save these changes back to the source database when I run it. So now when I randomize character, little dopey looking face. So I'm gonna save that, kill it, load it back up. And now I'm being proved a liar again. What in the world? I'll fix that in a few minutes, but let me continue showing how to actually make these modifications to the system. There were several people I was talking to that they were a little confused and somewhat lost, thinking that it was an overcomplicated process to actually add an event to the system. And especially with this, the things that are needed are a new table in database that would say, hey, I want you to store for this player ID all of these different character customization settings. You also need to expand the event table, the event list, so that way there's a new event. And to be able to add a new event through the database manager, you have to expand the events there as well. Which isn't really that complicated at all. I'm about to show you the def of the actual code. So these first three files are pretty much changes to the database manager. And for anyone coming in for the first time, if you follow the last event that was created, like change weather, that's pretty much the same thing that I do. Is most of this stuff is just duplicated over and over, modify what you need, and plug it in modularly. So if you follow change weather, you can see every place that you would need to expand your new event type to be able to add it to either side, technically. So we have a new event struct for the custom characterization, which the only thing it has in it is the player ID, which that's the only thing that the event needs to know is who are we modifying. So that way when you execute that in the system, it's going to get that handle to that player and allow you to customize that player. So we got the new structure here. We have the two new functions that are needed for the button press, which is pretty much add a custom character event to the stack and being able to edit that event, as well as a hook for the combo box needed for it, the save and cancel button, which is pretty straightforward. And within this, the only thing that's different between this and say the event above it is just specifying the event types. So this is going to be a event custom characterization, and it's going to use the event struct that we specified above, custom character. From that, the rest of this stuff is pretty much the same in every single event, which is pretty much adding that event to the event list so it can display it on screen, and storing everything it needs to store to be able to edit that event or reorder that event in the event list. If we come down here, if I can check this real quick, this is where we're actually building the event stack. So you have to come in here and add this information as well, where it's going to come in, create that. This is actually loading it from a file. This is when you build the event list, when you're loading an event into the event system in the database manager. So it's pretty much going to come through here and say, okay, I need to load the information for a custom character, of which is going to come in here, add a new data set. It's going to take the event segment, which is the string that it's bringing in, and it's going to load that information from the string to store it into the event stack. And this right here in this section is where we actually add a new event to the event stack, and this is actually what's used to display whatever information you want to show in your event stack for user readability. So that way when I add this event, I know it's going to be a custom characterization with a given player's ID. so that way I can match that up and make sure everything is still good. Plus, if for some reason you decide you want to delete a character, if you go through it and see that you're adding character 197 and you deleted character 197, you know you need to come in here and edit this event, because that execution is going to fail and just fall through because it cannot find this person because that person no longer exists. But all that's just situational. Just again, just more more places where we're trying to. This is edit to the. I can't talk today. It's too late. It's like almost 1 o'clock a.m. But this is where we come in to edit the event. And I think these other things are really minor. Yeah, this is just linking to getting the handle for the button in the actual form, and adding the event listeners for the function, and populating the initial combo box for the list of actors. So pretty much I'm using the stored procedures that I have for getting actors. That is the same stored procedure that I use when you go to the actors page and it populates the list of actors on that page. I'm using the same stored procedure to get a list of everything, well, every actor in that database. I'm going to get a link to all the actor IDs, put that in a vector list, and then get the name of every actor for those IDs and put that in the name list, and actually store that in a data for the combo box. So that way when you select data for the combo box, it's going to automatically know what name and player ID it needs to pull off from that information to save that to the database for when you actually set up the event. So over in the actual event CS, it's just adding the actual customization button and pretty much following, again, change weather as an example to be able to bring my new button into the system and populate it modularly with everything else that I need to do with this button, including right here where I say select tab. What this is going to do is if I click this actual custom button, I'm actually going to change the tab that all of my events are in to show the actual correct tab based on this enum that's right here. And because of that, I'm going to show this real quick. Pull this down. So pretty much this list on the event page, which is a little hard to see, this is pretty much a tab panel with every single page in here that we need for a different type. If you look at this and you look at the enums that define each of these different items and each of these different event types, all of these are in order. So when I added customization, I made sure that it was right after weather, so that way it goes to the right tab when I say, hey, go to customer characterization by enum. So that way it knows to go to this page and not weather or something like that. And if I can show it real quick. Here we go. So pretty much these are all those tabs in order from 0 to whatever game over is. Game over is never used in that tabbing structure, but I always keep it as the last one because right now game over just goes through and adds a game over event to the stack. It doesn't really show a page. But in case I want to add a game over configuration page, right now it's always the last in the list. The last in the list has nothing there. I also default to this page when you click cancel from an event. I just go to the last page. But if I wanted to add something for game over, I can easily add add a new tab here, populate something for game over, and then use that as saving information to save information to the database as well. Speaking of which, so to this actual form, I've moved this save start over. Save start system. I probably should squeeze this a little bit somewhere else. Maybe. Start save or show save. Open save. Okay, that's good. So pretty much all I did was just add a new button. That was the same button that we referenced. I named this button the same thing that we referenced back in the code. So when I click this button, it's going to go to this page. This is the combo box that's going to show the list of actors that we have currently in our database that we've configured. And then when you hit save or cancel, well, save will save that to the event stack that's over here, and cancel just cancels. So if we load this up real quick, this is probably going to be a long video. If we look at my opening event, I have customer characterization with character 1. If I double click this, I see that I can either select it to none, which will technically do nothing, or I can select it to Mika. So that way, as soon as the game starts, boom, we're going to start editing Mika's character customization. And another thing I want to cover that some people seem to, I guess, not understand fully. When you make an event, because the events are dynamic and can expand or have a lot of information in them, I'm not storing anything in the database for the events outside of the flow ID, the category ID, a map trigger if it's map triggered, and the actual event name, and the event ID, which is over here, which is 1. And what this does is the system will put that together to find the proper directory structure where the actual file for the events are listed. So with that said, if I go to my projects, I go to content, RPG system, data store, events. Let's see. I have old events here. I should have cleared this out. Blah. But the way this reads here, I can show you when I get over to the other NPC side, I can show this. But pretty much this will be your flow ID. This will be your category ID. And then this will be your actual event ID. And actually, I think that's 225. That's yesterday. So this must be an old event. Let me edit this real quick. Actually, I think this is our actual event. So if we look in our event, character customization should be 19, and then the player ID will be 1. And that's how you can look at your events and be able to tell. It also means that this is open for modding. What I want to do eventually is AES encrypt these. So that way, if someone does open it, all they're going to see is an encrypted string and not really be able to test that file. I mean, you can leave it that way or use the encryption. I'm going to try to make it to where you can use both back and forth and encrypt what you want to encrypt. But it's just a simple AES encryption on the string, so each line will be encrypted individually. Close that. Definitely do not save. Oh, I'll close the other thing I was working on. So that's everything that's needed for this to be able to add a custom event. I mean, it's literally like, I don't even think that was 10 lines of code. Next would be, if I bring this up again, if I come over here to the actual engine itself. So inside the engine, you have to pretty much do the same thing. Create your struct for your event. Let's see, that's the party. For the character customization, I tried to make it modular as possible. So for my character customization screen, if you notice, I had 4 different tabs. So I have body, head, expression, and hair. And within those, the different pieces that make up a character customization is the skin, the morph, a color index, or a regular slider. The regular slider is used for height currently. Anything that's a color is using the color index, and anything that's a morph is a morph index. And right now, skin is its own individual thing, so I just made sure I didn't want to include it as a color index, since it doesn't really store the color. It just stores a skin tone value that I pass to the actual skin parameter. So along with that, I have a structure that we're actually using to store to the database. That way it's easier to bring that information out with a query, populate this in a TRA, and send that back to the blueprint side so we can parse through it and actually load our data that we saved. So here we have the page type. We have the page, we have the customization type, the title of the actual entity, and then we have both the dial information and the actual real value of that data. And both of these are strings mainly because it can be anything between a vector or a scalar parameter, or maybe something else down the line depending on what type of customization you want to add. So that data can easily be parsed and read depending on your type. If I go back here, to these are pretty much the SQL functions that's used to save the information to the database. We bring in the player ID, whether we want to use the source database or the active database, and then the listed data that we have. And pretty much we're just, for the save, we're going through that loop and saving all that to the database based on the player ID. And we are going to, I think that's something I skipped. And we're also going to load that information back up whenever we need to access it, either when we're loading the game up to start playing with our character and we want to make sure those settings are applied to that character in question, and we can just go in here and load that information, or we can load that information back to the interface itself of the character customization screen. And then the last part will be the expanding the actual event holder, which is the NPC character that will actually hold that information for the events, which is, again, we're going in here just like we followed change weather in the other thing. We follow change weather here, and we can find out what structures we need to add to be able to bring that information into our system, as well as having a callback function that can pull that event out from the generic event stack and actually bring that back to the blueprint side so we can open it up, figure out what the player ID is, and do things based on that. And one thing that I see that I did not open already is the actual new store procedure to create that database to store, wrong file, store procedure. This creates the database to actually store our data. Now, if you're in the middle of development and you just decided, hey, I want to add a new table, You can do this as well to create a new database, but you will also have to have some kind of modified program if you want to keep your current source and update a database inside of there. So what I'm saying is this system cannot append a new database. Once you start making your database for your game, it's assumed that it's going to be created only at the creation point. So if you want to go in and add a table, you can add this template here for the table, but you will also have to manually edit your database. And I think I've showed this before, but it's no harm in showing it again. I use DB Browser for SQLite to actually make modifications or tweaking tables if I decide that I need to do that in the middle of actually processing and not and I'm not at the beginning of development. So pretty much I can just come in here, I went too far, go back one. And I can, if I needed to create a new table, I can just come in here and create a table. Or if I found out that, hey, I modified one of these tables wrong and this needs to be a string and not an int, I can just come in here, modify it here, and then come back over here to my toolkit. And if I ever create a new database, that would be updated in there to be a string and not an int. And then everything will be going, will be well if I just want to, hey, use the same structure to make a new game. But just like before, to make this new stored procedure, which will create the new database, I just copied the one that was above it, which is pretty much they're all the same. You come in here and you define what do you want to be your columns for your database table. So I have the actor ID, the page ID, and pretty much the other custom settings for that characterization entity. I bring in all their columns. I define their types. So we have 3 ints and 3 strings. And then the name of the database. And these aren't really needed unless you, for some reason, you want to make a forum where you can actually define the custom characterization for a character within this realm of the database manager. But since I already had everything on the game side to be able to save that information, I just kept it there, and I only use this to create that database and to create the storage spot, so I can just send that information to the database and read it from the database from the engine side. And really the only thing that this side will actually do is add an event to bring up that character customization. A few things I want to show. Is that since this is an event, I had to go in and actually add that as a new page to the event system. So if I enable that, I can see that I have a new panel in my event system. And since the event systems are controlled, the event page is the master page, and everything else within an event is a child page or a child pop-up of that one. You actually have to pass forward the inputs that you want to use in that interface to there. So pretty much all these custom interactions for moving the YOG, moving my controller, I just pass that forward into the custom characterization screen here. And you have to do that for the other inputs. So even over here where I move up and move down, left and right, depending on which one I'm showing, which page I'm showing on screen, it will forward those controls to that secondary interface. So once I have this in here, for any of the event-driven things, I have a Boolean that sits within the master HUD that everything else will use to determine whether something special is open. So right here I have show custom character, which is in my play HUD as a variable type. And what happens if we go to the source where we actually bring in the event, I'm gonna open the play HUD too, just in case I need it. So we have the event processor right here, and this happens on the tick whenever. This is processed mainly whenever an event has been started for process. What this does is pretty much come in here. It checks our flow controls to make sure that, hey, we're allowed to go to the next event and process something. So pretty much when we're ready to process the event, we're going to come in here. We'll see our new event here, which is custom characterization. We have a function definition for the custom character. This first part is pretty default. This just will get your current index, your current event index, and you have to call since you know this index will be a character customization. You come in and you get that information, you break the strut, and then use whatever's in your strut, aka whatever was saved in that file, to be able to process. So here we come and get the character. We get the player's HUD. We get the character reference that we want to actually modify based on the player ID. And if we look in here, the only thing this is we're looking through the listed AI players, which is pretty much our party if we have multiple party members. We're scanning through to see whenever the ID is actually the one we're looking for, to pass that reference back to the character. So once we have the reference, if it's valid, just to be safe, we're going to come in here and we're going to set up our camera. And this is actually inside of the actual panel itself, inside the HUD. So once we're in the HUD, we come in and get our system variables, which is just a handle to the RPG system and the HUD, which I use as a staple in most of the HUDs to make sure that we can easily call other parts of the system. We're going to create the customization blueprint, which if we look at this real quick, the customization blueprint is just a camera and 2 lights, maybe 3 lights. It's pretty much a 3-point camera, 3-point lighting setup. And what this is used for is, I'm not sure exactly when I will be customizing the character and what time of day it is, but part of the actual character customization is spawning a camera that we will be looking through to actually look at the character, and a light setup that will follow that, so that way we can actually see our character no matter what the lighting is in the scene for whenever we call our event. This isn't really needed. I just added it for paranoia, I guess, something like that. But it does look pretty good when I'm looking at the character through the customer characterization. So if we go back to here, we will create one of those cameras. We'll send our focus to it so we can look through that camera. And then we're going to start loading our database information, if we have anything in the database stored already. So pretty much this sets the party system so we can have a callback to saving the information that we're about to start manipulating. We get a list of the morphs, which pretty much we're going to go through here we're going to get the actor data that defines the actor. Same thing that we use for when we set up a character. Inside of that actor data, we actually have a morph list. And that morph list it defines what morphs and what group of morphs that we have for a player. So I think I showed this off before in another video, but now I have one that's more specific. If we go somewhere over the rainbow, there we go. So in our NPC data, if I open this, I have a new morph structure. So pretty much I have 3 different sections in here, which covers everything that we can do morph wise for our character. I have the body, which consists of the muscle tone morph. I have the head, which consists of all those 19 morphs for the face modifications and things like that. And then I have the face group, which has, you know, the smiles, focus, glare, just things that give your face emotions. The morphs that gives your face emotions. And one thing I want to say about this is, since there can be a situation where you want one dial to control more than one morph, or you want the positive of the dial to set one morph and the negative to set another. So what I have here is the ability to define a generic morph name, to define how many morphs will be associated with the positive notation of this slider, and then what morphs will be associated with the negative association of the slider. So that way it starts 0, 0 in the middle, and then if you increase it, it goes positive 1, you decrease it, goes negative 1. And then you can affect a group of morphs at the same time. And also, if you just only have one, then when you go negative, you'll just be negative. You'll just be sending that morph in the negative. And depending on the morph, you may not want that, because sometimes certain morphs, you know, if you go into negative, it's just going to screw up the model, of which you can control that all right here. You can control the default value. You can control the min and max extremes of that morph when it's going to be applied, and then that'll be adjusted inside of the slider when you load it onto the screen. After that long-winded introduction, we're pretty much just loading the default information from the class, and we're getting our morph family, and we're putting it into our morph list so we can use that to populate our information later. Trying to see if there's anything else to say. This happens when you click this stuff just happens when you click the different tabs. Back in the main HUD for the character customization, it will actually focus on a different bone in the body depending on what section you're on. So it gives you a different, you know, viewing range depending on what you're working on. And it actually twings in and out of that, so it should be a smooth transition when you're switching. This pretty much sets up everything that's going to go into that list. So we create a skin color. We're going to add the information that is going to, the array that is going to use for modifying the skin color, which is pretty much every material that's in the base actor. That's what's in this list. We have the height information that we're going to set, and that will automatically change the height of our character based on this actual callback type. And then we have the morphs, which will automatically take the morphs that we want to be in this page based on those groups that I showed you before, it will add those morph sliders to that page. So pretty much you can easily configure what you want to appear on which page and then apply that information into these morph list holders. All of these are basically the same thing. I showed you the loading configuration. I showed you how we go from loading either the information from our active database or we load the information from our backup database. Oh, and if there's nothing in the backup database, I also do have a fallout to where it will just zero everything to the center and pretty much give you like a grayscale for all your colors and make sure all of your sliders are in the middle if you don't have anything anywhere. And then when we save our information, all we do is just get we populate an empty struct based on everything that we have. So then we can just take our skin color, we set up our page type, we set up the customization type, give it a name, and then store the actual dial value and the real value. So that way, when we load up into the actual panel, we want to read the dial values to set it back. But when we load it into the actual game, we want to read the real value so we can set that to the actual character. And we just pretty much do this over and over again. We loop through everything for the morph list and save that to the database. Is there anything else to say? Because I wanted to go over, like, this video is already too long. I wanted to go over like the process that I did for bringing in this character into DAS, everything that had to be done in DAS to get the morphs out, to get the character set up, to get the clothing on the character, to bring it over to Maya, to get everything rigged how I needed it to go. I mean, I didn't have to do much in Maya other than the mapping animation, but it's still a process that I can show that would help some people. But as far as actually adding it to the engine, most of that should be it. I'm going to try to include this in the next release. I am having compile issues with 4.15, which I just got past, but now I have to fix the other errors that fell out for since I can't include engine.h anymore, and then that shouldn't take anything. So hopefully next week I can put out a release for the update of the engine, which will include the files, working files, for the character customization. The only thing is I can't include the DAS models. I can't exactly include the shaders that I have, but at least the majority of everything can be there. And since I've gone over this, hopefully that's enough information for someone to use it if they need to, or understand what they need to do to be able to utilize the character customization. Since everyone has their own different idea of what they want to have in as character customization, that's there. Do what you want with it and all the good jazz. So I'll probably start another video to go over the other stuff and end that here. Hopefully that was helpful for some. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a good day.